notice, to your great dismay, that all of the other lanes seem to be moving. So you change lanes. But once you do, the cars in your new lane come to a dead halt. So at a standstill, you notice every lane on the motorway, including the one you just left, is moving, except yours. Welcome to the world of Murphy's Law. This idiom says that whatever can go wrong, will go wrong, and it may just be right. Think about traffic lights at a pedestrian crossing. You stopped and you pushed the button. In the moment you look to stare down stupidly at the ground, you raise your head, and there they are, a group of the opposite sex. Slowly, you rise up. You sink your shoulders, slide your hands into your pockets, and do that mental mirror. Which side is my best side? Is it my right? My left? My left. So you look to the right, because those trees to your right are suddenly the most captivating things you've ever seen. Then, you sink the killer move, the smolder. You can see them looking, you can see them practically drooling. But you feel the need to prove to them that you're not someone that other people mess with. You know where the traffic light is. You just press the button. So you lean. You keep leaning. You can hear them judging you. What's he doing? They whisper. You can hear those sniggers. So you go for it. You put all your weight down. And the traffic lights moved. It was there and it's moved a metre forward. It could have been perfect. But then again, it could have gone wrong. So you sit on the floor and take it. Humility is like underwear. Essential, but indecent if it shows. Murphy's Law taps into our tendency to dwell on the negative and overlook the positive. But Murphy's Law is a reasonably new concept. Dating back to the middle of the last century, magician Adam Holshirk wrote in the 1928 essay on getting out of things that in a magic act, 9 out of 10 things that can go wrong will. Even before that, it was called Sod's Law, which says that anything bad that can happen will to some poor soul. And it's still called that here today in England. And believe it or not, there really was a Murphy, and he lived in the United States until his death in 1990. Captain Edward A. Murphy Jr. was an engineer in the Air Force, and in 1949 he was conducting an experiment to determine once and for all how many G's, as in the force of gravity, a human being could withstand. The project team used a rocket sled, dubbed as the G-Whiz, to simulate the force of an aeroplane crash. The sled travelled more than 200 miles per hour down a half-mile track, coming to an abrupt stop in less than a second. However, in order to find out just how much force a person could take, the team needed an actual person to experience it. Enter Colonel John Paul Steck. If you find yourself wondering who the sod was in Sod's Law, this is your guy. Over the next few months, he took ride after physically grueling ride, suffering concussions, broken blood vessels in his eyes, broken limbs, and they were the practice tests. Murphy provided a set of sensors that could be applied to Dr. Stack. These sensors enabled and were capable of measuring the exact amount of G-force applied when the rocket sled came to a sudden stop. But the first test produced a reading of 0. All the sensors had been connected incorrectly. For each sensor, there were 2 ways of connecting them, and each one was installed in the wrong way. When Murphy discovered the mistake, he grumbled something along the lines of, if there are 2 ways to do something, and one of those ways will result in disaster, an engineer will do it that way. Stack recognized the universality of what Murphy said, and so the saying is born. So why is Murphy's Law such a sound universal concept? Because when approaching a computer with a USB stick, we somehow always get it in the wrong way round, even though allegedly we have a 50% chance of putting it in right. Perhaps the best explanation of our attraction to Murphy's Law is an underlying sense of fatalism. Fatalism is the idea that we're all powerless to the whims of fate, that the notion that things that happen to us are unavoidable, for example, that spectacular traffic light miss. It's the idea that there's some kind of universal law at work that takes a certain glee at toying with us. Perhaps our connection to Murphy's Law is the result of the collision between free will and fatalism. When we feel powerless in a situation where we've been embarrassed or frustrated, we put it down to fate, that it was meant to happen, that we couldn't control it, when actually it could have just been us being extremely dense. So Murphy's Law reveals to us our own undeniable stupidity. Given a chance to do something wrong, we'll do so around half the time. But it also shows us how little control we really have. Sometimes, when you cry, nobody sees your pain. Sometimes when you smile, nobody sees your joy. And sometimes, when you're worried, nobody sees you. But fart just once. And so, before I leave you, lovely people, let me enlighten you to 3 other rules that go hand in hand with Murphy's Law. John's axiom: when your opponent's down, kick him. Paul's law: you can't fall off the floor. And martial arts law: you're not Bruce Lee. Fail-safes are sometimes referred to as idiot-proof, but Murphy's Law still has a tendency to strike, even when care has been taken to ensure against failure or catastrophe. And this leads us to the last law related to Murphy's, Gray's Law, which states that if you make something idiot-proof, the world will simply create a better idiot. Thank you. Yeah, exactly, entirely. I mean, when things go positive, we don't really remember it because in our mind we have this thought that they should have gone that way. But when things go wrong, it does tend to stick in our mind just because of the fact that it's gone wrong, we've been embarrassed, or hurt, etc. So Murphy's Law is not necessarily a law, but it is it's a way of remembering, I would say, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree.
Any further questions?
Yes, Mr. Parker.
Oscar, since one application of Murphy's Law is that when you butted your slice of bread after it's come out of the toaster, if it falls, it will land with the butted side on the floor. How much have you and Patrick been collaborating?
I wrote that in my speech and I had to cut it out because of Patrick's speech. So I can give you a very detailed analysis of that. It was actually Rudyard Kipling that first said that. And he found that out because obviously you don't think about it, but the side that has the butter on it is obviously the heavier side. So when you let go, obviously the butter is going to be attracted because of gravity to the floor. So again, it's not that there's a law that's going, you dropped your bread and now it's on the floor with the butter side down. It's just the fact that science is just saying, you idiot. Any other questions? Yes.
What motivates you to speak about failure?
That is a very good question. In fact, Murphy's Law didn't come first in my line of thought. It was Paul's Law, you can't fall off the floor, which I think is probably the most demoralising law you can think of. But it was the fact that it interests me. It's something that happens to us day to day, things go wrong, but we don't really think about why. And so there you go, a little bit more.
Okay, so finally, do you think as human beings can take some pleasure in feeling the world is somehow against us?
Not necessarily that we take pleasure, but I think if we were completely in control all of the time, I don't think we would be human beings. I think we'd be almost comparable to robots. The fact that nothing can ever go wrong. So when things do go wrong, I think it's a bit of a slap in the face that we are humans and that we're not in